In early August of 2025, President Donald Trump escalated his ongoing trade strategy with Canada, raising tariffs on non-USMCA Canadian goods from 25% to a striking 35%. This move marked one of the most aggressive steps in his administration's efforts to reshape North American trade, immediately intensifying tensions along the already delicate United States-Canada border. Canada's supply management system controls how much dairy is produced domestically and limits imports from foreign producers, particularly from the United States. Under this system, U.S. dairy imports are capped at roughly 3.5% of the Canadian market. Exceed that limit, and tariffs skyrocket, 200.41% on milk and nearly 198.5% on butter. These measures have been in place for over 6 decades, originally intended to stabilize prices and protect thousands of small, family-run farms from being outcompeted by massive U.S. operations with tens of thousands of cows. For Washington, these limits are the very definition of a trade barrier. American producers export approximately $800 million worth of dairy products to Canada annually, while Canadian exports to the United States total roughly $300 million. From the perspective of Trump and his allies, the restrictions and high tariffs beyond the quota represent lost opportunities for U.S. farmers and a lopsided system favoring Canadian interests. Despite these criticisms, the dairy sector is more than just an economic calculation in Canada. It carries immense political weight. Just weeks before the latest tariff increase, the Canadian Parliament passed legislation prohibiting the use of supply management as a bargaining chip in future trade negotiations. This law, passed with bipartisan support, reflects a rare national consensus that stretches from Quebec, the heartland of Canada's dairy industry, to provinces like British Columbia, Alberta, and even the Northwest Territories. Loosening supply management too far, officials warn, could allow foreign dairy to take up to 18% of the domestic market, a level that could destabilize the industry entirely, potentially leading to farm closures, job losses, and declining rural economies. Canada's commitment to defending its supply management system is underpinned by more than just domestic political considerations. Ottawa wields considerable leverage in trade negotiations due to its vital role in supplying energy, critical minerals, and automotive parts to the United States. These sectors, are integrated deeply into North American supply chains, giving Canada bargaining power that extends far beyond just milk and butter. The country's approach, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, really emphasizes long-term stability and structural resilience over short-term concessions, signaling that Canada is prepared to walk away from any deal that threatens the integrity of its industries. President Trump's strategy has often relied on applying tariffs to pressure trading partners into making rapid concessions. In theory, higher tariffs create economic pain for the target country, incentivizing them to adjust policies quickly to avoid further losses. However, in the case of Canada's dairy sector, legal safeguards and political unity have slowed the process dramatically. The Canadian government has shown no inclination to bend under pressure, demonstrating the limitations of a strategy that worked in other contexts, but, honestly, struggles against a deeply entrenched and politically protected system. Meanwhile, U.S. dairy producers continue to face volatile prices, oversupply, and intense international competition. The tariffs, rather than immediately benefiting American farmers, risk harming importers and consumers more than foreign competitors. This situation highlights the reality that not every aggressive trade move yields the intended result. The repercussions of Trump's tariffs extend far beyond dairy. Michigan, the heart of America's auto industry, has become a focal point for concern. Rising tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, critical inputs for vehicle frames, chassis, and components, have already begun to strain production. Imported steel and aluminum have carried a 50% tariff since June 2025, while Canada now faces a 35% rate on non-USMCA goods. The stakes are particularly high for automakers such as General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, which rely heavily on Canadian suppliers. The financial impact is already visible. General Motors reported a $1 billion drop in second quarter profits, attributing much of the decline to new import taxes. Stellantis reported a $2.7 billion loss in the first half of 2025 for similar reasons. Ford's results, expected soon, are likely to follow the same pattern. These figures underscore the unintended consequences of tariffs. While intended to strengthen domestic production, they are putting immediate financial pressure on U.S. manufacturers and threatening jobs. Modern vehicle assembly relies on complex global supply chains. Even a car marketed as made in America often includes dozens of imported components. Tariffs on leather, textiles, interior trims, and critical battery components create a cascade effect, increasing costs for domestic automakers before a car even reaches the factory floor. For electric vehicle manufacturers, this challenge is even more acute, as the U.S. lacks large-scale domestic battery production, leaving companies reliant on heavily taxed imports. Automakers initially absorbed the costs of tariffs to shield consumers, but industry analysts warn that these burdens will inevitably pass down the supply chain. According to the Center for Automotive Research, 25% tariffs on autos and parts alone could add $108 billion to industry costs in 2025, excluding additional effects from steel and aluminum duties or layered tariffs from multiple trade partners. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation cautions that higher costs will likely increase sticker prices, potentially pushing entry-level models out of reach for many consumers and slowing the adoption of new automotive technologies. The impact on employment is equally concerning. The standoff between the US and Canada serves as a broader test of economic leadership and strategy. Trump's approach relies on high-pressure tactics, deadlines, and the threat of immediate economic consequences. The August 1st tariff increase exemplified this approach, challenging countries to accept expedited bilateral deals, many of which were superficial in substance. Canada, however, chose patience and prudence, refusing to rush into concessions that might compromise long-term stability. Prime Minister Carney's strategy underscores a key principle. Protecting domestic industries and markets often requires resilience, not reactionary measures. By focusing on long-term planning and structural adaptation, Canada aims to maintain a balanced, mutually beneficial trade relationship while avoiding hasty compromises. In contrast, Trump's aggressive tactics risk short-term disruption without guaranteeing the intended gains, illustrating the limitations of tariffs as a tool for forcing policy changes in politically and economically complex contexts. The US-Canada trade dispute highlights the intricacies of modern international commerce, where tariffs can have ripple effects that extend far beyond their intended targets. While Trump's 35% tariff on Canadian goods is intended to pressure Canada into reforming its dairy system, the reality is far more nuanced. Canada's legal protections and political unity safeguard the dairy sector, while broader economic ties ensure that disruption from tariffs hits the U.S. auto industry and consumers first. Michigan's auto workers, Detroit-based manufacturers, and American consumers are absorbing the shock, while Canada adapts, invests, and plans for long-term stability. The trade standoff underscores that in a deeply interconnected economic landscape, unilateral pressure can backfire, reinforcing the importance of strategic patience, legal safeguards, and careful negotiation. As the situation evolves, the lessons are clear. Trade policy is not merely a tool for leverage. It is a delicate instrument that must account for the complex interplay of politics, economics, and human impact on both sides of the border.